Welcome to episode 193 of the Brainy Business, understanding the psychology of why people buy. In today's episode, I'm so excited to introduce you to Chris Rawlinson, founder of 42 Courses. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. Today, I am very excited to introduce you to Chris Rawlinson, founder of 42 Courses, a company he started because he believes that learning should be a fun, interactive journey of discovery. That it's not about being right or wrong, because in fact, sometimes the best way to learn is to be wrong. And much like a great holiday, he says it's often more about the journey itself in learning. You can tell, of course, why Chris and I became fast friends, I'm quite sure. I'm not going to get too much into what 42 Courses is, and why 42? Because you'll hear about that directly from Chris during our conversation. But what I will say is that they have done a fantastic job of creating engaging courses that people love to take, actually complete, and keep coming back for more on topics like Applying Behavioral Science by Rory Sutherland, the Even Happier course on how to increase your own life's happiness. They also have courses on copywriting from Cannes Lions, some on fintech and storytelling and creative thinking, good advertising, and so much more. Before we jump into the meat of the episode, I want to make sure you know that within the show notes, there are lots of links and important information waiting for you, including past episodes, books discussed, a way to get over to the 42 Courses website, and more. Those show notes are waiting for you within the app you're listening to or at thebrainybusiness.com/193. Those already on the Brainy Business list got a direct link from me in the email you receive every Friday. Not on the list yet? Simply sign up for any freebie at thebrainybusiness.com and you'll be automatically added. The freebie for this episode is the first chapter of my award-winning book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. And if you already have the book, in which case, thank you, you'll also be automatically added to the list when you get your copy of the free PDF companion workbook. Both are housed in our free behavioral economics community called the Be Thoughtful Revolution. There's a link to join that global community in those show notes as well. Now let's jump right in. Chris Rawlinson, welcome to the Brainy Business Podcast.
Such an honor to be here, Melina. Lovely to chat.
Yeah, I am so excited. We have been chatting quite a bit over the past couple of weeks. And so I feel like I know so many interesting things about you. I always love, though, for our guests to introduce themselves. So can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and your background and how you found yourself in this space that's very much tied in with behavioral economics?
Sure. No worries. So I'm a sort of dyslexic ex-ad man who's had a number of weird and wonderful roles in life so far. I sort of used to design and build smart homes for rich people like Terry Gilliam and Madonna, then got a commercial pilot's license, then ended up running a vineyard, then got into advertising, then got into education. So obviously a very natural career path. As I grew older, I always struggled with learning, particularly with academic style learning. It just always found it quite hard. And particularly when I got into the corporate world, I spent a lot of years at Ogilvy, and I just found that the training that you would get, particularly online learning, was generally pretty mind-numbingly boring, and made you want to fall asleep. And I just thought, God, it would be great if it wasn't like that. And I think with the internet and a whole load of other things that we've got nowadays, it shouldn't be that hard to learn new things. It should be something that's easy. So using lessons from the world of advertising, and particularly with behavioral science, because the first course that we made was with Rory Sutherland, who runs the behavioral science division. We ended up building this new platform called 42 Courses. Apologies for the name. It's everyone's like, what happens when you make 43 courses? It's a play on words, and it's related to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So in the book, they create a supercomputer and ask it what is the ultimate meaning of life, the universe, and everything. And the computer says 42. So that's why we're called 42 courses. And so we've been running this business now for sort of 5 years. And then obviously with the pandemic that happened, year and a half, 2 years ago now, we've seen tremendous growth. And my vision, my dream is to make great learning that's as enjoyable as playing your favorite game. My vision of success is if I can get onto a bus or a plane or a train, and rather than the person next to me playing Candy Crush, they're learning something that's going to actually help them in life. That's going to be my eureka dream moment. And I think we're getting there. We're not perfect, but we're getting there. So that's kind of, I guess, my short story, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I know that I think the idea of with 42, we were talking about this before of, it could be like the using the Disney vault and that kind of like scarcity model of where I don't think they do this anymore, but back they used to have movies that would only be out once every 20 years or whatever, that you could then buy them again. And then they go back in the vault. So I think there's a stated model that if, at some point when you have more than 42 courses, if you wanted to have them be like only 42 live at a time or something, that could be a good.
That is our rough plan. A rough plan is we try and be quite careful about the subjects that we choose. And a lot of them are kind of behavioral science, either literally behavioral science or have a lot of behavioral science in them. And I think it's because the three kind of pillars of content that we've identified as being critical for people to learn if they want to be successful in today and tomorrow's world are three kind of key things. One of them is, I think you need to really upskill in creativity, because that's mostly killed when you go to school or university. Second is sort of similar, but we've called it problem solving. So if you understand how to solve problems, regardless of what industry you're in, that's incredibly helpful. And the third pillar is kind of more wellness, well-being. I think particularly now when you're living in a world where everything's always on, it's important to understand how to take a break. I mean, like we did a course on sleep and managed to chat to the UK's top sleep doctor to help make the course. And it didn't dawn on me until we started making the course that, we spend, a good sort of third of our life sleeping, and we're never taught about it at school. Like no one ever says, hey, this is how you need to sleep, or this is why you need to sleep, and this is what happens. So yeah, it's been interesting. But I think our thinking with 42 is that once we've got 42 courses, we will continue to make new ones, but as you suggested, we'll keep it as only 42 courses live at any time. I think we're on 22 or 23 or 4 at the moment, and we make probably around 6 or 7 a year. But we spend a lot of time making these courses, so they're pretty well researched and thought out, and there's a lot of testing that goes into them. But it's great fun, and luckily we've got lots of people who seem to love them too, which is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that helps with the paradox of choice problem too, right? So if you get in there and there are 10,000 different courses you can take on 1 million subjects, and you just are like, ugh, what am I supposed to do here? Where do I go? Where do I start? And you just do nothing instead. And so to make it, like you said, putting into being really good at the categories that you have content in and having a limited number of courses in each one at any given time makes it so it is easier for people to make a choice and learn something.
100%. Yeah. We've reached, I think we've reached or are reaching that critical mass at the moment. At the moment, we've got some very basic filters on our website, but we already know it's not good enough. Like we need to filter those into 3 or 4 kind of easy to understand content themes, so that, you don't get that sort of paradox of choice thing going on. it's interesting. We run lots of experiments all the time. So with our pricing as well, we originally started off, it was just, here's a course, you can buy it. And then we're like, hey, well, lots of people want to take lots of the courses. So why don't we do a yearly subscription? And then we had other people who were like, is there a way to get this more affordable and pay monthly? And we're like, okay, we'll create a monthly one. So now we've got 3 that, you can buy it either monthly, yearly, or pay by course. And then we've obviously used, so that's the Goldilocks effect, which is kind of nice. And then we use all of the other things, some of which I've been relearning in your marvelous pricing course. So thank you. And is in your book as well, actually, which I loved.
Thank you.
Sort of saying this is the one that's the best value for money. This is the one that's the most popular. So all these little cues and nudges to nudge people in the right direction. What's been very interesting with the pricing is we ran a framing experiment for about 2 months. And what we did was we had a thought, I guess, that that at the moment we have, in dollars, it's about $50 per month for a subscription. Or if you want to buy a year, I think it was $400 US. And we thought, well, why don't we try and create the same comparison? So a lot of websites do this. They'll say if you pay per month, it's $50, or if you pay per year, they'll say it's $45, and then there'll be a small little thing which says paid, but you have to pay per year. So we tried doing that to create a more equal frame, and what happened was the yearly one became the lowest value one, because the monthly one was $50. The yearly one worked out as something like the equivalent of around $35 per month. And weirdly, more people ended up going for the yearly one, not for the monthly one. And for us, that actually wasn't as good, because a monthly one is much better for a company's cash flow than a yearly one. Because a yearly one, what happens with a yearly subscription is generally you use the service, and then there'll obviously be some people who forget about it halfway through the year or at some stage. And then suddenly you get a reminder like, hey, there's $400 that's going to come out of your account. And that mentally is a big number for you to go like, whoa, like, do I want to spend another $400 or not? Getting that person over the fence is much harder than the monthly, hey, I'm going to buy this for $50 a month. It's a much more, luckily for lots of people, it's a much easier number to deal with. I've noticed actually Disney Plus, they recently increased their pricing. I don't know whether anyone else has seen this, but rather than saying that it's now $16 or $20 or whatever a month, they say it's $1.50 or $1.99 a day. But the big number is $1.99, and so you're thinking, wow, it's only $1.99, and then in the small print you're like, per day. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I would imagine that for a lot of monthly subscriptions, we're going to start to see more of that kind of thing.
Right. Well, it's the model on asking for donations, right? We've all seen for just 10 cents a day, you can help this child in this country, or the pandas of whatever, right? For just 10 cents a day. And then but they don't let you pay 10 cents a day, right? You then get this so that is this big fat check that you have to write for a year. And then you lose a lot of people in that process by having that jarring. You set the wrong anchor in a way that if you're not letting someone pay that way, it can be too jarring and problematic for them, where they might fall off on the other side. Obviously, that model does also work. So it's not to say that can never work. But for businesses like you're talking about with a Disney Plus, where it might be annoying to people at some point, where they're thinking $1.99 and then they get a $20 bill and go, wait, what? Right. But but I'm not supposed to pay that. That's wrong. So, but I do love that you did testing to see, which ones are going to be working, and knowing what you want people to get. So it's not that the concepts didn't work. right? But it was driving you into a way that you were hopeful that it was going to make the monthly one look more popular and that you wanted that. And you tested it. It did the opposite. And so you can adjust. Yeah,
we switched it back. I mean, I do think it depends what your business model is and what your company is. For education, which is essentially we're an education company, I always say that education is a Veblen good. One of them, and a Veblen good is something where the more it costs, the more you value it. Rory Sutherland always talks about watches, the sort of Patek Philippe or a Rolex, can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, but it actually tells time less well than a $5 Casio watch. So with education, there's definitely a part of that going on, in that if you spend $10,000 on an e-learning course, you will value it much more than if you spend $50 on an e-learning course. And we do find that up to a point in our subscriptions as well, or in our purchases. It's very interesting, and we've seen this with reviews as well. We've been very lucky in that we tend to get just lots of 5 out of 5 reviews, which is fantastic. The only time when we've got low reviews, interestingly, has come from, I think, 99.999% of the time, whenever we've got a low review, which I would say for us is normally a 4 out of 5 one, is generally comes from a monthly subscriber. I'm not 100% sure whether this is just a random correlation, but it seems to happen way too often for it to be a coincidence. So I think the customers that spend the least with you are often the most critical. I was actually chatting I think you've interviewed Richard Shosson as well.
No. But Richard Chataway, yes, but not. Chataway. Yeah, we talked about this before. Yeah.
There's another guy called Richard Shosson, R. Shosson on Twitter, is brilliant. Also a very big supporter of behavioral science, or speaker of and practitioner of behavioral science. And yeah, he was saying the same. I think when the customers that haggle and hassle the most are often the customers that are the most demanding and the most problematic to deal with. I think this is across industries.
Oh yeah, the Pareto principle definitely comes into play, that 20% of your customers bring in 80% of the revenue. And so you want to focus on them. And the other 80% often have, then there's like 20% that are creating the most complaints and problems and headaches for everybody. And so if you can kind of balance out, like, you end up kind of doing this like over the moon, feeling like we need to accommodate everybody so that everyone can be happy. But there's the little bit of, if the people that are going to complain and be difficult and take up tons of time and make it more expensive for everyone, at some point, if you just say, you're just not our customer, and that's okay. We still like you. You're good people, and we don't do what you're asking for, right? Like, and you can just bless and release those people can help make the entire enterprise be much more profitable and productive, and have people who are happy with what they get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly convinced that a lot of companies, the best thing they could do is actually to increase their pricing.
Yeah, for sure.
Particularly if you're in consulting or if you're in education or anything like that. So many examples I've seen people increase the number of customers. They maybe have a small lag for a few weeks or a month where your existing customer base either is like, oh, no, I don't like this anymore, it's way too expensive. But then you will find, as long as you're doing some marketing, you will find these other people. And I've seen that happen a number of times. And it's something we're trying to figure out as well, because I think when you are doing stuff monthly, from a business model perspective, it makes so much sense. I mean, this is why all these big companies, Spotify and everything, are doing so well, is if you have monthly subscriptions, your revenue is so predictable, which is amazing. The best businesses are normally boring businesses. Monthly subscriptions help make your business a little bit more boring when it comes to the financial side of things. What I don't know is what the tipping point is of a monthly cost. And, I don't know whether we can go much higher than $50 as a monthly price before it starts to become quite a punchy monthly amount coming out of your bank balance. Because our dream is, I didn't start this to make loads of money. I mean, we've got to make money in order to pay staff and put food on the table. But, the reason why I started this was to try and make that, great learning that's really enjoyable for people. And so you want to make that as accessible as possible, which was another reason why we started the monthly subscription. And it's been lovely seeing, and hearing comments from people in Africa and India and certain parts of Asia as well, where they'll email us and say, this stuff was never normally available to us because you normally can't learn from a company like Ogilvy or Barclays Bank, or most recent partner is Parsons School of Design, which is like the number 1 ranked design school in the US. If you want to go and take a course with them, normally it's like $5, $6, maybe $10,000 to take a course. So yeah, I think trying to make this stuff accessible is really big. It's always that balance, though.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I will be definitely linking to episodes about the truth about pricing for other people that are having similar thoughts. And I know, Chris, you and I have been talking about this a little bit. And like you said, you've started taking my pricing course that I have available, where we were, doing some of each other's course models to kind of see similarities and differences and learn from one another. Because it's always interesting approaches and seeing what's working for other people, how you can integrate that into your own stuff, getting inspired. And one of the things I would say too, that really you want to be looking at your economies of scale. And actually, so I was telling you, I just interviewed John List yesterday, and these episodes are coming out months from now. And so I'm not exactly sure when they're going to come out, but I believe I'm going to make it so this episode is going to come out after that. And so John was talking about, if you have economies of scale or diseconomies of scale, and how that can determine if your idea is going to be scalable or not. And typically with a course, you put a lot of money. You can put in money up front and then you sell a bunch of them, and it doesn't cost you anything more. There's no additional stuff if you're doing online training and courses. Like for me, when I'm not having to moderate those and it's just a true DIY at your own pace, I'm not involved at all, then each one, gets to be where it costs me less and less to produce total courses because of the economies of scale. And we talked about that for your model because you have a team that's actually on the back end moderating all the responses instead of making that automated, which is a choice because of the type of, I don't want to say certifications, but the congratulatory, you did it at the end, and making sure people are actually doing it versus just typing in gibberish words or whatever. So someone's actually going through and doing that there's almost a diseconomies of scale, because as you have more people taking it, you need more staff to be able to go through all of those. So that has to factor into your pricing. But the people on the front end, if you're not making a big deal about that you offer this and how valuable that is for them to know that that they have this two-way communication versus just a one-way communication, then it doesn't feel justified perhaps in having the price be more than $50. But when that's brought into the priming, the framing, the conversation before the price comes up, then you feel better about that amount because it's justified.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the what is the comparison point in your head? And if we made more of a point of, hey, by the way, when you take our courses, these aren't just an automated online course. This is a course that you're going to be able to receive feedback for. And the reason why is, we want to make people we want to help people in real life. So if you're doing stuff that's always automated, it's very easy to cheat the system. Mm-hmm. With us, if you don't get over 75% of the course correct, you fail and you have to retake the whole thing. And if you get something wrong, we reset answers and then we'll email them. And if necessary, we'll even hop on a video call and say, hey, do you need a hand help with this? So yeah, it is a much more it's much more hands-on than a normal e-learning course, which I think it's a great point. Like, we need to make a bigger point of that up front to then make the price a little bit more easy to understand, because that is a huge thing for it. I mean, I don't know any other courses at our price point that offer that, as getting real world feedback from real people. I mean, it's nice. And I think the good thing with it is that it becomes a surprise and delight moment.
Yeah.
So we've had, we're always kind of thinking about other things like the peak end rule and stuff like that. So we have all of these little nudges, again, because the first course that we created was Rory on behavioral science, and it's still our best-selling course to the day. We tried to integrate as many things that we learned from behavioral science into all of our courses. So there's little things like when you get an answer, when you get 3 answers right in a row, there's a little notification. It's like, well done, brilliant, congratulations. If you've started a course and not finished it, we send you quite funny emails that kind of prompt you in different fun ways to get on with the learning. And I think it's all of these things combined have done very well for the end user, in that we have a much higher completion rate than, I would say, most of our competitors. So the average completion rate for an e-learning course at the moment is around 7 to 9%, which is horrendous. And it's part of the reason why I started the company. I mean, if you just think about that for a moment, if you think of all the billions of people who need schooling in today's world, and all the people who need continuous education, there's no way that we will ever have enough teachers and real life classrooms to teach everyone. So online learning will have to be a big part of the future of education, whether we like it or not. And if your completion rates are 6 or 7%, I mean, that doesn't say much for e-learning. With us, we've managed to get, I think at the moment it's 82% or something, but it sort of flicks depending on how the wind's blowing. Lowest it goes down to around 70%, and the highest has been technically over 100%. So we have quite a few companies who will buy access so that they can take a course, but then we have students who like it so much that they then start buying other courses on their account, which is great. And so we create, like, we gamified the whole thing. Like, you earn points and badges as you go through. When we mark your answers, if we find that your answer is brilliant, we can give you extra badges and extra points. And if you're a company or a team, you can learn together and see how well you're doing in the same course, which is quite fun. So it adds these other small little motivations, I guess, to make you learn a bit more. Like, particularly if you're in a company, no one wants to be at the bottom of a leaderboard. So if you're earning points, like, you're like, oh, okay, Melina's only like 5 points ahead of me. I'm going to go and just quickly take a lesson, and then I'm going to beat Melina. Okay, great, done. Great. It's all these little fun things that we try and add in there.
Yeah, I know. I've got a ways to catch up with Louise, as does everyone. Louise
is amazing. Louise is our top learner in Ireland.
Yep. Yeah. Number 4 on the overall leaderboard from when I had last checked. And I know I'm not close to that yet, but she's been in there a lot longer. Of course, she's true.
And that's another good framing point. Actually, we realize that when a new user logs in, it's quite demoralizing, because with us at the moment, when you create a new account, you join the general user list. So it will say that you're number 20,000 or whatever in the world.
Hooray.
Yeah, it's like it feels like an unsurmountable task, right? It's like, how am I going to make up all these places? So what we're starting to do now is we're rolling out an update so that when you join, it will show you where you are in your country, which is going to be much better for most people. It'll look like you're, maybe in the top hundreds, or at least in the top 1,000 or something. Like, it's a much easier number to look at. So we're constantly trying to make the system smarter to present the end user with a situation that motivates them to feel like they can do this. If you join and you're like number 100, that's much more motivating, and much you would think that it's going to be much easier for you to get to number 1 than if you join and it's like you're number 320,000, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Why am I even bothering? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's there's all these little things that we do as well.
Yeah. Well, I would love if you can give a little bit of insight about the courses themselves. So like you said, a lot of other content we'll put it the kindest way possible and say not effective. I'm not going to say it's not good.
Yeah.
But what is it that you did specifically in the way that the content is presented to help people get from, instead of where everyone else has a 6%, we'll be kind. We'll say 10%. We got a 10% completion rate in all e-learning of the world, right? And you're at 80. What did you do that's different to make it so that people are more self-motivated and actually complete those courses?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, as with many things, it's not one particular thing. It's lots of small decisions that we've made over time. The key bit that we started with was just splitting the content up, right? So everyone learns differently. Like, some people love learning through videos. Some people love learning through podcasts. Some people love watching videos. And none of those are right or wrong. They're just different ways that you can learn. But there's tons of research into all of this already. So none of all the research is in the public domain. It's just, I don't think anyone really kind of looks at it properly and puts it all together. My assumption is that the reason why the bad stuff is happening is that generally when you look at a new industry that happens, and I think we've seen this with print going to digital, and we saw this originally with music going to digital, they take the real life thing and then put it in a digital way. And it tends to never work quite well. So originally the newspapers were a PDF of the newspaper, but then then you had blogging that came about, and basically all kind of modern news sites essentially kind of operate like a blog. And they rank all the articles, and everything's a little bit sort of shorter, way more images, because that's how we like to consume content on the internet. It doesn't matter whether you're a New York Times reader or anything reader. It's the same. The model is now the same, and now print know how to put print online for it to work, if that makes sense. And I think with education, the same thing happened. And essentially what happened is a lot of the academic industries were like, here's our worksheets, or like, here's all the workbooks, study books that you need. Now these are now PDFs that you have to read. And then here's the lecture, but we've conveniently snippeted the lecture up into 15-minute chunks or 20-minute chunks or whatever. I mean, some didn't even bother doing that, or some still don't bother doing that. It's like, here's a 45-minute lecture, cheers, go. That's very hard for a person on the internet to stay engaged with, because like when we started this interview, you very astutely said, hey, have you turned off like Slack and Chrome and email and everything else? Because if I didn't, there's going to be a little thing popping up going like, new email, new whatever. So whatever it is that you're doing online, particularly if you're doing continuous education, it needs to be short and snackable and bite-sized. And so what we did is, sorry, it's a lot of a preamble. So what we've done is we did a bunch of things. Like we split all the topics up into individual lessons, and each lesson we try and make as a little, somewhere between 5 to 15-minute bite-sized chunk. Each lesson contains a number of key things. So it always contains a visual element, because the brain can take in and process visual images really easily. Plus, it kind of lights us up a little bit more. So which is always either a video or an image or both. And these videos or images are meant to help put across the things that we're teaching. Then there's text, which is normally around 300 words or even less. And the text is always written as a story wherever we can, because literally the only way that we remember things is through stories. So we won't just give you a whole load of facts. We'll tell you a story. And then in the text, if there's stuff that we think is interesting that people might want to dig into, we have hyperlinks so that you can go out and dig a little bit further and go down the rabbit hole and sort of go on your own little mini journey and adventure. And then at the end of each lesson, there is a question to test you on whether you've understood what you've just read or watched. And that question is not normally, we have different question types, but a lot of them are not about being right or wrong, because in life, it's rarely about being that clear cut. It's more about getting you to think and build confidence and have a go at something. So, for example, in a copywriting course, we might be telling you about a concept, like there's the power of saying you in your copy a lot. Like if you're saying you, it makes the reader think of themselves, which everyone loves themselves. So if you're writing copy for an ad, you should always make sure that the word you is used quite a lot, and people personalize it a bit more. So we will show them an old ad of, I think in one of the courses, we show them an old ad for a motorbike, and then we get them to write the body copy. We give them the headline and we get them to write the body copy as the challenge. And that is then marked by us. Now, there is no right or wrong answer for that. It's subjective, but you've now had a go at writing your own ad, and that builds you confidence. So when you have to go and do that in real life, you're then not so scared about it, and you just get it done. The other thing that we did was we give real-time feedback. So once you've answered something, either you will get an immediate response, or if they're marked by us, you will get a response within, I think at the moment our max response time is 45 minutes, but we aim to get them marked within half an hour.
What about in like middle of the night, like different time zones? Do you have people answering 24 hours a day?
Yeah, we got people in different time zones to cover everything, and then also very helpfully, I'm a massive night owl, and a lot of my colleagues are huge early birds, so it's nice. Like we can kind of get it covered. So very rarely do we exceed that limit, and it just pings as notifications. So it's fairly easy for us to do the marking from our phone, which is nice, or if we're on a laptop, so you can do that too. But yeah, it's always a constant mission to keep up with the marking. But with the learning, I think this idea of kind of splitting things up into little lessons which have a mixture of easy and hard stuff really works. Like when we were doing all the research when I was starting this, with video, we can take in a huge amount of information in a short amount of time, but we don't retain a lot of it because it's quite lazy. It's not active. When you're reading, it's much more active in that your brain is having to process stuff a bit harder because you're actually having to read. So it's mentally a bit more strenuous. But if it's told as a story, you tend to remember those things much better. So with each of the lessons, as you go through, we kind of try to make some things hard, some things easy. So you feel like you're on a bit of a journey. It's tough when you're teaching real subjects. And when I say a real subject, I mean, if you're teaching something like behavioral science, there's no clear start and end point. If you're teaching maths or coding or a language, there's a very clear start and end point. Yeah, it starts easy and gets harder. And if you think of the things that are most addictive in life, that tends to be a thread. Like if you're playing a game, like games are super addictive, they start easy and then they get harder. If you're teaching behavioral science, it's really hard to do that because you're having to explain new concepts in each chapter. So you can't just keep on making it harder. Otherwise, by the end of the course, they'll be like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. So it has to naturally ebb and flow a little bit more. And the way that we've tried to do that is we add, as we go through the course, we'll keep the text and the language the same, so easy to understand, but we will give you more practical or more challenges to do where you have to fill out a template, where you have to write the ad. So it's slightly harder, but not hard, if that makes sense.
Right. But it's hard in a way that though it's letting you do the thing that you were hoping to do, and you didn't know going in you were going to have any opportunity to actually have someone help you with it along the way. But it doesn't have a ton of scary pressure like in school. I think there's a lot of good going on there, of course. And I would also say that I think you talked about Candy Crush, and I think there's a bit of any of these games that you play. Yes, they get progressively harder, and they do have this ebb and flow process of where after like a really hard level, you may have a much easier level. And I think, as far as like dopamine and anticipation of if I'm going to make it or not, and then you do get a win, and then it helps with that overall percentage of how often things work out. There's a lot of value in not making it just get hard. Because then if someone gets stuck or is like kind of mentally fatigued and going, oh man, like yikes, that was really hard, and then it's even harder the next one, that's a good bail point. Whereas if it's hard and then they get to do something that's kind of easy and like reset and go, okay, I get this now, I'm good. Then you can build back up, and then you get to come back down when that cognitive load gets to be too much.
100%. And I mean, the other thing that's sort of related to that is, if you think about the best learning experiences in real life, they're often when you're chatting with your colleagues or your peers. So I think there are some studies done in businesses and in universities to find when innovation and ideas happen. In universities or academic institutions, they were found to be just after lectures, and they were when students were leaving the lecture hall and they would say, hey, what did you think of that? And that sparring of trying to understand what was just said leads to new ideas and also leads to better understanding of what was just taught. In a business setting, it tends to be found mostly at businesses with shared canteen areas where they're sitting over lunch and then they're discussing ideas or things that they're working on. In most education settings online, that's missing. So what we did is we created these question types that we call them opinion-based questions. And the way that they work is, I think in one of the Babel economics courses or Babel science courses, we talk about framing. And then one of the questions is, how would you get more people to drive electric vehicles? And there's no right or wrong answer. You write down your answer, and then when you press enter, it shows you everyone else's answer in the world of how they would solve that problem. And your task is simply to select 3 that you find interesting. And they get little notifications when you upvote them as well, which is quite nice. But it enables you to look at the world or look at a problem from another point of view or another perspective. And I think when we're doing online learning, that's normally very hard to do. We all have a filter and a lens in the way that we look at the world. Again, it's not necessarily right or wrong, but based on my upbringing and a whole number of other things, if I look at something, I will think one thing. And if you look at something, you will probably think something slightly different. Now, I won't know what the solution is that you would have unless I ask you. And in most online learning classes, that's not a thing. So with us, we do that by asking these opinion-based questions, which allow you to look at the world through someone else's eyes, or at least get a peek into what that might be. And those are often the most popular question types that we have as well. Like, people love it because you can see what everyone else is thinking. And we found that a really hard balance. Like, at first we thought that the idea would be, or the solution would be, to build a massive community around it. That's kind of probably the obvious one. The issue with that is that when you're learning, particularly online, if you have a forum built into it, it's a massive distraction because you'll end up having a chat and then suddenly the time that you should have been learning is now being spent chatting to someone else.
Right.
So we have to think about these things really carefully. We did try it for a while and we found that it was too distracting for the learners. The completion rate started to plummet. I'm not saying that there isn't room for a community. I think it's one thing that we've got to do better, but I think the community side of things need to be at certain break points. Our thinking behind it is at the end of each chapter, or maybe at set times, then you point people towards a community where they can chat. But we're still figuring that side of things out, to be honest.
No, that's interesting for sure. And I know from when I did my master's virtually, and the discussion post piece and seeing how other people's natural response to a question was so different from mine. So to see where other brains were going first as we're talking about these concepts, I've made it for my teaching at Texas A&M. I harp on students all the time, like discussion post and commenting is the most important thing you're going to do in this course, because learning what other people are talking about, defending, seeing, like when you explain something and someone is somewhat confused by it and you can refine that, or you, like you said, sparring and going off of each other's comments is so valuable in shaping your learning and expanding it. It's just such an important piece. And I love how you've worked that in to where the, discussion opens up. And because you have to then just say, yes, this is interesting. That's interesting. One, it motivates people to put in effort for the responses they write there because they want to be seen as interesting by other people. And it helps someone then get the nudge, like you said, maybe a year after I took the course, someone said that my response was interesting. I go, oh, that's awesome. I should go back and take one of those courses. It's been a while since I've done that, right? Go see what's new because I'm on this monthly plan and I should go do something else, right? So it all really comes full circle and helps to bring that you can't just take what worked in a live experience and try to just piece it in virtually. When Gleb Sapersky was on the show in fall of 2021, he was talking about transitioning, coming back into the office, remote, hybrid teams, how to be looking at this and have the same conversation. And where people in business will say, we need those serendipitous water cooler moments, right? When we don't get people meeting in the hallway, having that conversation, we're not going to be innovative anymore. We have to be in person. And that doesn't have to be the case. And as you've shown with this example, there are ways to do that can help get the value of what was happening one way and bring it into a virtual space, which allows you so much more opportunity, looking for new team members and all sorts of things. So I love everything that you're doing at 42 Courses. I'm so excited that you were able to join me today, and we can and have talked forever.
I can definitely talk to you all day. I'm a massive fan, and thank you so much for everything you're doing to help other people, and also congrats on your book again.
Oh, thank you.
If anyone's listening and you haven't bought Melina's book, go and do it right away. It's incredible. I think if you're looking to understand behavioral science and you want an actual practical guide with lots of interesting stories, I mean, I've read probably hundreds of books on or around behavioral science. I honestly think it's the best one if you're looking for that kind of practical, real easy to use user guide. It's incredible. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the very kind words, and that just always a delight to chat with you. We will, of course, have a link to the 42 Courses website in the show notes. Is there anything else that we should be linking to and for people to reach out or anything along those lines?
I'm sure that we can come up with some sort of promotional code for you. So we'll think of something and add it in here. But we'll have a code that we can make with Brainy work.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll make the code Brainy, and then if you want to take an individual course or a yearly course, you'll get a surprise percentage off.
Ooh, there's our surprise and delight elements, our incentive, dopamine, anticipation. You got to go find out what your surprise percentage off is going to be.
I better get it right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Again, I love all the things for 42 Courses, and it was, as always, a delight to chat with you today.
Same. Thank you so much.
Thank you again to Chris Rawlinson for joining me on the show today. What got your brain buzzing in today's conversation? For me, I don't even know where to begin. I have had the honor and joy of speaking with Chris a few times now, and as I'm sure you won't be too surprised to learn, we go over our allotted time every single time we chat. While I could talk about so many things, I want to bring it back to the format of learning and that quote I shared from Chris's LinkedIn from the beginning of the show, that it isn't about being right or wrong, because so often the best learning comes from things that went wrong. We don't learn too much when things go as we expected, but there's opportunity in the stuff that makes you question, makes you curious and full of wonder. Why did that happen? Or, what could that mean? Are so much more powerful than just checking boxes that did what you expected. Learning is about interest and engagement and enjoyment. I'm linking to the episode with Michelle Auerbach in the show notes on the power of story and how we can't make decisions until we have an emotional engagement, which story helps us to do. If you don't internalize and remember the information, memory and story are tied together as well. It just isn't that valuable for you. Far too many courses are sold and never started, or people don't get past the first module. 42 Courses is different because they approach learning in a different way. They looked at working with the brain and making it fun, easy to work with, and I love that. For everyone who's ready to start their courses immediately, go on over to 42courses.com. That's 42courses.com. There is, of course, a link for you in the show notes to make that easy. And be sure to use the code Brainy when you sign up for a special discount. That's BRAINY when you sign up at 42courses.com for a special discount. And before we close out the episode, I must give a shout out and huge thank you to Louise Ward of the Behavioral Science Club for introducing Chris and I. She definitely knew we would have a lot to talk about, but I'm not sure anyone could have known just how much. Louise was my guest on episode 118 of the show, which is linked for you in the notes of the episode, along with so many others, like the one on my behavioral economics analysis of Disney, my interview with Richard Chataway on surprise and delight, the importance of testing, and so much more. And as a reminder, those notes are waiting for you at thebrainybusiness.com/193. There, you'll also find a tweetable to make it easy to share and give Chris some Twitter love, which tags me as well. Or, of course, you can always come up with your own. Chris is on Twitter as 42 Courses, 42 Courses, and I'm the Brainy Biz, B-I-Z. Tag and chat with us there. And of course, get all the goodies waiting for you in the notes at thebrainybusiness.com/193. And if you enjoy the experience I've provided here for you, will you share about it? That could mean leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen, sharing this episode or any other with a friend who you think would find value in the insights, or even hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate it, and you. Thank you again to Chris Rawlinson for joining me on the show today. It was a delight to chat with and learn from you. Next week, join me again for another brainy episode of the Brainy Business Podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Molina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.